It depends on who you ask. To the average Egyptian person, pyramids are not just shapes, but large ancient masonry tombs holding the remains of past Egyptian kings. Pyramids are also symbolic of culture, wonder, and history, not only to Egyptians, but the world at large. There are 1,001 things to discuss on the topic of ancient Egyptian pyramids, all of which are sure to wow you, from why they were built to what they house, aka ghosts, believed to roam within their walls, the legacies they contain, and the great mysteries of how they were built. The ancient Egyptians believed their kings to be half human and half divine. They were seen as the mediator of the gods and the people. It was also believed that once a king died, he left a small piece of his spirit in his body known as Ka. This is why it was more important for them to mummify royal corpses to make this left behind a piece of the king comfortable in its final resting place. This was also the main reason for the birth of pyramids. The large structures were also built so that the Egyptians were able to bury their mummified king food, furniture, gold vessels, and other things they believed would make his afterlife as convenient, if not more convenient, than his earthly life. However, before pyramids were built during the late 3rd dynasty, past kings and queens of the 1st and 2nd dynasties were buried in carved rocks covered with flat-roofed rectangular structures called mastabas. The first pyramid is believed to have been built by Imhotep, the royal architect to the then king Djoser, around 2780 BC. During the 3rd dynasty, pyramids were initially traditional and more detailed mastabas, but eventually they became a thing of power, ambition, and tradition. This particular type of pyramid was known as the step pyramid because it began by placing 6 mastabas, each smaller than the one beneath, in a stack to form a pyramid rising in steps. The shape of the pyramid was chosen specifically because the smooth angled edges symbolized the rays of the sun and were designed to help the king's soul ascend into heaven easily to join the other gods, particularly Ra the sun god and the first ever god. Several other pyramids were built after the step pyramid. By the ending of the 3rd dynasty, every royal corpse was entitled to one, and the effort was doubled so that the next pyramid was more magnificent than the last. It is no wonder that the most celebrated pyramids were built in the 4th dynasty. They were the resting places of 3 different pharaohs and are known today as the Great Giza Pyramids because they were all located in Giza. The northernmost pyramid of the group was built for Pharaoh Khufu, who was the 2nd king of the 4th dynasty, by his architect and vizier Himunu. It was called the Great Pyramid because it was the largest and oldest, and it stood at an amazing 481.4 feet tall. The middle pyramid was built for Pharaoh Khafre in the 4th of the 8 kings of the 4th dynasty. It was 471 feet tall, and the last pyramid to the south was built for Pharaoh Menkaure, the 5th king of the 4th dynasty, and his was only 218 feet tall, small compared to the other 2 but large nonetheless. Now that you know that pyramids are a fancy solo graveyard, I believe you would agree that it's just the right setting for mysterious legends of roaming ghosts and supernatural circumstances. Over the years, many exploring archaeologists have had stories of unusual situations to tell, situations that completely convinced well-grounded scientists of the supernatural. From mild manifestations of impenetrable chambers to wild manifestations of death and ghost sightings, these stories are sure to keep you on edge. One of the stories might have inspired the popular horror sequel Final Destination. While there is no documented link between them, once you hear of the adventures of famed archaeologist Howard Carter and his team, you'll be convinced of the unquestionable similarities. On November 26, 1922, Howard Carter, Lord Carnarvon, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, and a team finally broke through to the interior chambers of the pharaoh Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter managed to lift the lid of the tomb, Lord Carnarvon asked Carter if he could see anything through the small space. It was famously reported by the team that Carter's mesmerizingly replied, "Yes, wonderful things." Just after those words were uttered, the entire team reported hearing loud, unsettling wailing sounds. These wailing sounds were so frightening that the team decided to leave the chambers. As they were leaving, many experienced hallucinations, where they witnessed ancient Egyptian ceremonies, and others spoke of floating light orbs that they noticed in empty passages. As creepy as this sounds now, it was not the major effect of the visit to King Tutankhamun's tomb. Only 47 days after opening King Tutankhamun's tomb, Lord Carnarvon was bitten by a mosquito thousands of miles away in London. While you may dismiss a simple mosquito bite, we must take into account that there was a rumor circulating about a pharaoh's curse on whoever opened the tomb. The curse was said to bring death and bad luck to those who disturbed the sacred resting place of a pharaoh. So Lord Carnarvon dismissed his tiny mosquito bite until he accidentally opened the wound with a shaving stick and infected it terribly. He died 4 months and 7 days after the opening of the tomb, after suffering several weeks in sickness due to the infection. His death began the ripple effect of deaths touching all of Howard Carter's team and beyond. Lord Carvadon's dog howled in agony until it died. His friend who came to pay his respects at Carvadon's grave slipped into a feverish coma and died 12 hours later. Another leading member of the expedition, named Arthur Mays, also slipped into a coma and died of unknown causes just days after Carvadon's death. Other radiologists tasked with documenting the remains of King Tutankhamun's tomb died days after complaining of experiencing severe fatigue at the tomb site. Another member of the expedition took his own life after running mad. The only untouched member of the original expedition was Howard Carter himself. Many other archaeologists have visited King Tutankhamun's tomb after Howard's crew and have all suffered unusual circumstances of death and loss. Howard died 17 years after the expedition of lymphoma. He was believed to have escaped the curse, but another expedition party swore that during an expedition decades after Howard's death, they saw him standing over the tomb and inspecting the contents like any normal archaeologist would. There were several other experiences related to the legend of the curse of the pharaohs. It was also discovered that many of the tombs had written curses on them to whoever disturbed the tomb. One story records a paperweight given to Sir Bruce Ingram, composed of a mummified hand, and was with the sayings, "Cursed be who moves my body, to him shall come fire, water, and pestilence." Soon after receiving the gift, Ingram's house was destroyed by fire and then destroyed again by a flood once it was rebuilt. Another strange legend of the Egyptian pyramids is that of the Ghost of Khufu. King Khufu was said to be a man extremely proud of his Egyptian heritage and culture, a man who would be thoroughly dissatisfied and triggered by the commercialization of his once great empire. Several tourists and archaeologists reported incidents of being harassed by an ugly man wearing ancient Egyptian clothes. He repeatedly told the tourists and archaeologists to leave. Some even claimed that he was walking into their rooms and demanded that they pack their bags and leave. When tourists reported the disturbances to local authorities, they dismissed it as a drunk local until authorities realized that the occurrence had been going on for over 60 years. A certain archaeological team attests to seeing the same man twice, nearly 20 years apart, and claimed that he wore the same clothes and didn't look a day older. This figure was believed to be the angry ghost of King Khufu, offended that his once great empire had been reduced to a common public museum. Late in the 20th century, archaeologists began to use more scientific means to explore the pyramids. They began to use tiny robots to infiltrate chambers that were impossible for humans to enter because of their small and hidden entrances. Chambers that the eyes of men have not seen in 4,500 years. There was a small success with using the tiny robots. They were able to uncover few hidden chambers. It was not until they tried to breach the chambers of a queen's tomb that the robot began to malfunction. It managed to snap one photo that looked like an ancient graffiti before it finally crashed. The process was repeated several other times with several other robots, each of which experienced the same malfunction as the first. It has been 25 years since the first attempts, and the contents of that particular tomb are still unknown today. Paul Broughton was a British philosopher who traveled all over the world to study and learn the yogis and spirituality of several cultures. Once he heard of the rumors concerning the Egyptian pyramids, Broughton traveled to Egypt and received a license to spend the night in the chambers of a king's tomb. We all know what happens in the movies that have characters like Broughton, don't we? He got what he was looking for. Thankfully, it was only an unsettling experience and not death. Broughton had local policemen nearby the pyramid to secure him while he carried out his research. It is recorded that after Broughton put his light, he saw a figure in the dark, slowly shifting across the room, followed by wailing and a distant chant. He began to look for his tape recorder to capture the sounds, but found that the item he had made sure to have with him had disappeared. Just as he reached for his flashlight, he began to experience paralysis in his body. Unsure of whether he was crippled by fear or external forces, Broughton looked around and saw the glow of firelight coming from down the hall. He recorded that at first, he believed it to be a police officer only checking up on him, but then wondered why they would make use of candlelight. When the figure finally appeared in the doorway, it was wearing ancient Egyptian garb, resembling the drawings on the walls of the tomb, and it looked about the room and walked away. Broughton's paralysis receded. He hastened out of the pyramid to find his first tape recorder sitting on a nearby rock, and the police stationed a few meters away. When asked if they had taken his tape recorder, they replied that they had not. Needless to say, Broughton never ventured into another pyramid again. The Egyptian pyramids still remain mysteries. Modern architecture has not been able to comprehend the methods used in building such monstrosities. in the amount of time it was built, by the number of people who built it, and without the knowledge of the technology the 21st century identifies with. The pyramids were built even before the invention of the wheel, so even the transportation of the building stones remains a mystery. Thanks for watching. Leave the comment down below and let us know, what do you think the pyramids are? Don't forget to subscribe for new and upcoming episodes.